G'day guys, hope you're keeping well. Coming at you here on a Friday morning. Been recording content and writing hooks and scripts and all of that good stuff. I wanted to address a topic that I have touched on before. It was actually in a video that I did in Australia titled True Leisure, Does the Grind Ever Stop? And this video now came out of a comment on my weekend vlog, which is like, I get what you're saying with having to push yourself and having to fill your schedule with commitments. But for me personally, this commenter was saying, I find myself burning out. So how do you balance this high level of productivity, this grind, with also not burning out? Because I think probably a lot of people, when they first get onto the path, whether they start a business or become an entrepreneur or just start pushing themselves in life, they start going to the gym, they start praying more, they start contributing to projects and organizations and stuff on top of their 9 to 5 or on top of their study commitments. If you're coming from probably your average 9 to 5 kind of mindset, I can see how introducing elements of these commitments and wanting to sort of live a more intentional and purposeful life could easily lead you to burn out. There's two key concepts that you need to understand taking into the future. Intentional leisure. This is something you should really think about more and understand how you're going to implement it in your life, because I feel like most people do not understand this. As Christians, we kind of get this concept in prayer. We kind of get it given to us because ultimately, from the point of view of the material, physical world, prayer is not productive. Prayer does not achieve anything materially. It's useless in a purely physical sense. And if you think about prayer physically, we're literally sitting down and we're not saying anything vocally. Sometimes we might be. We're not necessarily reading a text. It's very much a pause. It's a contemplation, a meditation, an inner conversation, an examination. It really just causes you to stop and pay attention to those more interior things. So when I think about intentional leisure, I think about what are activities that I enjoy doing that have a relational aspect to them. A relation that nourishes my soul, that refreshes me. It could be a relation with the outdoors, a relationship with a friend where you're able to have good, emotional, deep, meaningful conversations, not just talking crap at the pub over a few drinks where you've spent time with friends but you haven't actually connected. A relation between you and a classical work of fiction where you can empathize with the characters, where you understand human nature, where you do take a pause from life by reading the book, but it's not just mindless blue light propaganda coming from Netflix. You're actually entering into a work of truth and beauty. Tolkien, the classical works of fiction. Night and day difference between intentional leisure and what majority of the world does today in their downtime. So that's the first concept. If you're burning out, or if you're scared of embracing this grind, which is difficult at times, I will ask you, are you taking any time at all for intentional leisure in your life? Because if you're not, if you're chasing noisy distractions, well then I don't blame you for burning out, because from what I'm hearing, you're spending 24 hours a day in this perpetual state of busyness and doing and absorbing and hearing and listening. You're never actually giving your soul the time to refresh. Even with prayer, you can be in kind of like a bad mindset of prayer where it's not actually refreshing you, where it's distracting you. You're still caught up in the world. I think St. Francis de Sales or St. Teresa of Avila says that so often we try and quiet our bodies for prayer, but our mind is wandering all over the world. So intentional leisure, number one. Number two is keeping the Sabbath holy. Now, I was listening to a podcast where he said that it's interesting that keeping the Sabbath holy is actually a commandment that's above do not murder. So for whatever reason, the commandment of keeping the Sabbath holy is more important than not murdering. Why would that be? I think it's so easy to get caught in this mentality, especially when you do enter the space and you're like, I need to build wealth, I need to build a business, I need to train myself. I think it's very easy to get into this mindset where you're just constantly working. And again, I'm obviously a big proponent of that, but there's a great reason why it's not just optional to rest in God's eyes, but it's a commandment. You must rest. You are a human being who needs rest. God rested on the seventh day. Like, it's no accident that this stuff is all through Scripture and the commandments. So what does it look like practically? Well, most simply, you should have one day a week, Sunday, which you do devote to that intentional leisure and that intentional rest. You can catch up on a bit of sleep. You should go to Mass, to worship. You should spend time in prayer. You should connect with your family. You should take silence time. You should take intentional leisure. That's all you should do on a Sunday. Obviously, sometimes you don't have a choice in terms of if you have work commitments, but most simply and normally, you shouldn't be working on Sundays. Now, that's a way that even if you don't have like a perfect headspace or balance during the week, at least you and God are giving yourself the Sunday for some of this stuff to happen. Now, the asterisk that I found with keeping the Sabbath holy is that there's a sense in which you should keep the Sabbath holy every day of the week. So for me, what that looks like is, I wake up at 4:30 or 5 and pretty much give myself 13 to 14 hours, depending on what the day looks like or when I finish, but I'll work my ass off till dinner time. I'll go to the gym on my lunch break, I'll go to the gym in the morning, I'll say my prayers, I'll work, I'll do social media, I'll work on the farm here. Whatever the case is, I'm keeping the entire day to lock in and grind. But once dinner's ready, or once it hits 5 o'clock, now there's some days where I do have commitments after dinner and that can't be helped, but my ideal baseline blueprint day is when I hit 5 or 6 o'clock that I finish texting and stuff, I close down my laptop, and I shouldn't be replying to DMs or posting videos or reels or whatever past that point, that I should make a really intentional effort to just shut it off. And that's a way that, if I take my 6 days a week, which is from 4 a.m. to 5 p.m., then my Sabbath for each day is that time after dinner before bed where I'm going to pray a rosary with my wife and hopefully spend some intentional time with my wife. And even if I've had a super busy day, if I can at least secure and protect those last couple of hours for myself, for my family, for that intentional leisure that refreshes me, you're in a much better headspace for the following morning. I've had days or times where I have worked till late or have worked till 9:30 and you pretty much just crash into bed and start again at 4 the next morning. But sometimes that might be necessary and sometimes you will have to do it, but I feel like in the long term, in terms of cultivating a sustainable lifestyle where you're not slacking, you're really pushing yourself forwards, but I really feel you need to give yourself that time. So whether that be a short night routine or maybe a bit longer like I try to do, where it's more like an hour or two depending when you finish, keeping the Sabbath holy in that final part of your day, and then keeping the Sabbath holy in the weekend. So that's point 2. So I think understanding these 2 points of intentional leisure and the commandment of keeping the Sabbath holy, I think that's the key to living a very intense lifestyle, but also making it sustainable. And I guess the intense, productive lifestyle should be fueled by a healthy spiritual life. You know, if you're in a healthy spiritual space, in a healthy creative space, if you are taking care of your relationships, whether that be with God and your family and your wife, when it comes to working 10 or 12 hours a day, I feel like for me, that work comes from a place of joy, and it comes from a place of peace and fulfillment and intention, where it's not like I'm just dragging myself through the day and just trying to get to clock off time, but it comes from a very deep-seated sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose is fueled and maintained by the intentional leisure and prayer time that I have outside of work. If I don't have that space outside of work to look after my soul, I think it's very difficult to then also maintain that work productive lifestyle to any decent degree, because then you do just end up burning out, or you end up doing it for the wrong reasons. You know, you're just worshiping an idol of your business or of your productivity. So they're just little switches you need to make in your head, but it's definitely worth thinking about that and examining it deeply, and then applying these concepts, like not just understanding them and accepting them as an ideal, but how will I carve out that time in my life? You know, how will I start practicing this concept of intentional leisure as opposed to following the ways of the world, which I think are ultimately unhealthy and seek to distract men and women from finding their true purpose and living meaningfully. So yeah, that's all I had for you guys today. Let me know if you've got any more questions or ideas around this. Would love to hear them. All right, God bless.